In July 1897, Scottish engineer James Blyth constructed a large electricity generator in the garden of his home in Kirk. It was constructed of 4 times 13-foot cloth sails, and it produced free, clean electricity by harnessing the North Sea. Blyth offered this to the villagers, but far from being impressed, they called it the work of the devil, and Blyth and his device were hounded out. And so began a long and negative relationship of the people of Aberdeenshire with wind. The most recent instalment of this took place on Saturday evening at around 5 p.m, when Inveruri's Barry Robson blamed the wind from the Firth of Forth for his side's failure to harness long ball tactics and see out a 1-0 victory over Greenock Morton. The story doesn't end there though, because rumour has it that in Kirk, the minister the following weekend noted in his sermon that he was very pleased with the running stats of the parishioners and that they were boys doing 10 to 15 kilometres. So, thankfully I am not Barry Robson. This is not the Oh No 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 podcast. It is the Oh No No podcast. It is not the YNS Shuffle. I'm Leslie Mabin, and I'm very much looking forward to discussing the events of the last weekend with, first of all, I've got tonight Carol Alison Smith. Carol, how are you?
I'm very good. It's been a lovely day in Barcelona. I'm looking forward to chat about a draw. I don't even say excited, but chat, definitely.
I've got storyteller extraordinaire and local historian Duncan Cameron. Duncan, how are you?
I'm very well, mate. Thank you, very well. Delighted that you're in the hot seat, and I thoroughly enjoyed that little slice of history as well.
And last but not least, we have Robbie Weir. Robbie, how are you?
Yeah, I think we've now established that like you guys must have like a Lennon-McCartney relationship in terms of like intro writing, and I'm just Ringo Starr. I just come along, and sometimes it's like, yeah, you can just come along and add in a wee bit extra. We've got to give him his intros, but no, that was superb, Leslie. And glad that you're in the host seat. I'm interested to see the direction that someone goes. Admittedly, not too enthusiastic to talk about yesterday, but we're here.
Well, a bit of energy history to start the evening. Fortunately, maybe not so much energy on Saturday. For those of you who might have missed the game or maybe need a recap, it ended 1-1. So Raith Rovers took the lead towards the end of the first half with a headed goal from Jack Hamilton. However, we were not able to see the lead out. Kris Moore flicking home an equaliser for Greenock Morton from a corner in stoppage time for the game to end 1-1. Now, the lineups came out at around 2 o'clock. Only one change from the week before, with Paul Niso coming in for Sean Byrne. Callum Fordyce also disappearing from the lineup due to an injury, which seems pretty serious. Callum, if you're listening, we hope you're on the mend soon, and we hope to see you back playing nice balls out of defence sometime soon. Carol, I'll come to you first. When you saw the lineup, were you surprised to see Paul Niso in there?
No, I think with the news that we'd had during the week from several press journalists, I was going to say journalists, but it's the Courier and the Fife Free Press, that's a bit loose, that there was some injuries and that there was going to have to be changes because our bench is definitely getting more and more depleted every week as we go. So I was surprised to see him start, but not surprised to see the change.
I mean, it's always good to see a boy coming in and getting game time. I mean, you never want a George Guitau or a Lewis Boudinaucus type situation on your hands when the boy comes in and his sole purpose is to function as a smallest clue. I was glad to see him in too. Robbie, what about you? How were you? What were your thoughts when you saw the lineup?
Yeah, I mean, there was intrigue about how Niso was going to handle the circumstance, the situation, really. Seemingly, he'd been, from what I've heard, he's potentially been in line to play with in the derby, but Sean Byrne passed a late fitness test at that point. It's disappointing to see Sean Byrne drop out of the team. I thought that he had a positive impact last week. Still didn't stop the relentless calls, despite being injured in the South Stand, from certain sections of the sport for Sean Byrne with his continuing chant, which confused quite a lot of people, I would add. Also, again, I know that you've touched on it, but disappointing to lose Callum Fordyce. Just removes that extra sort of confidence that we've got the depth there to be able to sort of handle if any circumstantial injuries come up on the day. I know that we've got Jordan Doherty, but he worked well enough down on that right-hand side. So yeah, if there was one change that I maybe would have wanted to have seen going into the game, maybe to have brought in Josh Mullen right from the start. I think that he had a really positive end to the game last week, and it was disappointing to see him not come in from the start. And I felt that just over the piece as well, to give Morton their due, there was a sense of inevitability about their improvement this week. I don't think there was any chance that they were going to be as poor as they were compared in the game to St Johnstone last week. They brought back Jackson Longridge. He adds a lot of depth in terms of the experience that he brings to the table for them. So obviously it's a game with two sides, and you've got to give them credit for how they set up, and they looked far more confident and competent compared to what they seemed to be against St Johnstone.
Like Ross's dad in an early episode of Friends, we say, "Hey, Robbie, you stole my questions. Never mind Chandler stealing my moves." Because I was going to ask Duncan about Mullen and if that's one change you might have seen. But I mean, I'll just throw it out to you anyway, Duncan. I mean, I think that was the right starting lineup, given that we'd won reasonably convincingly the week before.
Yeah. I think so. But mostly for lack of alternatives, really. To give Barry Robson a bit of slack before potentially coming back to him later on. There's not a huge amount of variety open to him. I think the one thing with Paul Niso, to come to him first before I actually answer the question, the big thing for me was getting a look at him to find out what kind of player he is, because that was one thing. We've banged on at great length, and I'm actively doing so again, that Scott Brown and Ross Matthews are too similar. It was like, well, there's another guy. Maybe he's different. Literally, I'd never seen him kick a ball until yesterday. So is he a 6? Is he an 8? Is he a 10? Is he incredible? Is he terrible? What will that possibly be? So it was nice to see him. The fact that he just kind of slotted into that midfield suggested it wasn't going to be, a drastic deviation, and I think the evidence kind of bore that out. In terms of the right-hand side, Mullen over Mick Mullen, I think you can make a case either way. I don't think it's an egregious one. Paul McMullen is not on form. I don't think that's a controversial thing to say. And I'm as big a fan of Josh Mullen as anyone. But if you're looking to get a bit of pace in that side that doesn't have an awful lot of it elsewhere, from the outset, I don't think it's a kind of criminal decision. I still feel like there are... Sorry, I'm going to go early. I think there's more of an issue in the approach than the sort of personnel or even really the formation. I think there's a stylistic or a sort of philosophical issue at heart that's holding this team back a little bit at the moment.
A very profound way to start the evening, and let's hope that doesn't set the tone for the rest of it, but I think that's something we will undoubtedly return to later. I have to say, when you were pondering whether Niso was a 6, an 8 or a 10, it did take me a moment to figure out where you were going with that. And I was wondering if you meant a 10 in the sort of Josh Mullen sense of being a 10, but you realised then you were actually talking about playing style and not scores and ratings. 15 minutes passed. A succession of Morton corners followed. We didn't do a great deal. Now, one of the best barometers that we have as to how we're going to play is Carol's observations of the body language of our team in the first 15 minutes. So, 15 minutes in the game, Carol, how were you feeling?
I was fighting the demand for a siesta, if I'm going to be honest. It didn't fill me with joy. Everyone just looks, and it's not tired and it's not heads down. It's just, I want to use the word confused. It's like there's no plan. And if the plan seemed to be for a long time, get it to Dylan Easton and we'll get a penalty and we'll be fine. But that's not working anymore. And Dylan Easton is off. And if he's not up for it in the first 15, we do not do well. And for a while I thought it was a little Carol conspiracy theory, but I'm really starting to buy into this now.
Absolutely 100% a point to that. And I think it does show, just how much we do rely on Easton and his undoubted talent to make things happen when things aren't coming off. So there was, at one point, there was a shout for a free kick on the edge of the box, which ended up not being a free kick. It was effectively a collision between Ian Wilson and Dylan Easton, which Colin Stevens saw nothing in. The next thing I have got in my notepad says, goal, ! Hamilton 39. And we did get a goal. So Jordan Doherty pulled the ball down from an errant goal kick, took it on a wee run down the right wing and crossed it for Jack Hamilton, who headed home to great delight of those in the South Stand. Robbie, just give us your thoughts on that. Tell us, who do you think deserves the most credit for that? Jordan Doherty, Jack Hamilton, or was it a team effort?
Yeah, I mean, it falls really into the category of team effort. I think that Doherty's done really well. The Morton keeper, Storrer's basically been put under a sort of slight degree of pressure. I know that Nisod sort of played the ball forward initially. The keeper's got to recycle it. Doherty reads it really well. Basically intercepts it as it's going out to the wing, and he just catches the left back for Morton, Delaney, just completely out effectively with it. Just motors on, he gambles. He sort of does something that was very rare for us yesterday, because I just felt that there was a dearth of quality between the two sides. There wasn't really anyone that stood out in that first half as being a threat, and Doherty was the one that just grabbed the game by the scruff of the neck by getting down the wing. Absolutely perfect cross. He's done tremendously well to get it exactly where it needs to be. I've spoken a bit before about Jack Hamilton. Duncan and I had that sort of discussion, and I'd sort of said if you can feed him in that 6-yard box and just put those opportunities in, this was a good example of it. We'll come on to later on in the game where there's an example where it was less so good, but I think for his credit, Jack Hamilton had a bit of a better performance yesterday. I know that there were some people that were sort of questioning the ladies of Gym 64 for their choice of man of the match because they were the sponsors yesterday. I felt he had an improved performance, so it was good to see him. He did really well, and the second half with his hold-up play, he got his goal, and you can't take that away from him. And yeah, it was he was in the right place at the right time, and beat effectively Moore for the goal, which is no sort of mean task given the height of the centre back and where the ball was played to.
His movement's great. Like it's really good. It's not just a case of, the cross comes in and he's standing waiting on it. He sort of drops off initially and he goes behind Moore and waits for Moore to go and then comes round in front of him. So yeah, we have been kind of hard on Jack Hamilton, but definitely deserves credit for that because, I can't remember if it was on the pod or if it was elsewhere when we were talking about it and you were saying about, if you put these chances on a plate for Jack Hamilton, he'll score them. And I was pretty dismissive, saying like that's like it's like of course, like yeah, if you put the ball in front of him 6 yards out, like yeah, obviously, like everybody should be scoring from there. But this is it's not as simple as that. His movement makes it as much as the cross does.
I'd say also as well, I mean, it's not as simple when we spend a lot of the ball shelling high balls up to him. I just think that's completely counterintuitive. But we'll come on to that. I know Duncan's touched on it already, but yes, we will.
Yeah. Just sorry to jump in and just go back a sec, but I just actually think, the two of you really, Carol, Les, you both, that Easton dive, just in pot, he was booked for diving, really difficult to see from the other end. Did you get a good look at that? Did you get a read for, did the referee get that right?
I mean, I've seen them given, but he went down slightly easier than he should have maybe, but I wouldn't have booked him for diving. But then, like going back to what I said earlier, with him getting so many penalties, he's been marked, I think, and it was coming.
I thought it was interesting yesterday that felt like Morton seemed to really target Dylan Easton a bit after he got the booking. You noticed that in particular. I think it was McPherson. There was a sort of moment over on the railway stand side where effectively Easton's trying to win the ball. He's harrying him, and then McPherson went down, and straight away he's over at the referee asking, like, he's on a booking, come on. Which would have been
as well. You should.
Quite right, absolutely. But yeah, it was very noticeable. I don't necessarily buy that Easton's particularly off form. I think that it's just teams are more aware of him. It's probably kind of, you see it quite a lot in this division that players start getting targeted. I think that Easton still had a relatively strong performance yesterday. He was looking to get on the ball quite a lot. There was generally a lot of the stuff that happened that was positive was centering around him, and I think that's probably true most weeks, I would say.
From my perspective as well, I would say it wasn't enough there to warrant it being a free kick. I wouldn't have given a yellow for it, but Colin Stephen is going to Colin Stephen. It was, it was a coming together. If it was motor racing, it's what you would call a racing incident, and you just play on. It was not worthy of a yellow in my book. I'm also due a bit of an apology to Jack Hamilton and actually to my dad, because after the Dunfermline game, my dad had said, Hamilton just needs better delivery. He's a poor man's Holland. Feed him balls and he'll score. And I replied, I think at the moment he's more of a poor man's Cody David. So I think Jack has redeemed himself a bit in his book.
That's
real
two ends of the scale there.
Yeah. It did seem like Hamilton's goal yesterday was the one that we've all been waiting for. Everyone's complained on the podcast that he's not done this, and this. And yesterday, that goal just seemed to be I would say the piece de resistance, but it was definitely a vast improvement on previous weeks.
I think that just in terms of the performance from him, I just think that he was getting about the pitch a lot more. Again, you never know if players have maybe picked up a knock in training and it's a bit more difficult for them getting about the pitch or just wherever they're at. It was funny because I did bump into Ali Pilmore at half time and he brought up the statistic about Hamilton and his goal scoring. So rightfully he was getting pelters off of people about him. Again, it's an improvement to that statistic. So it's good to see him getting on the score sheet. Again, I know that we can be critical of players, but we all want the players to do well. It's not for a lack of trying to put players down or kick them or anything like that. In that sense, we all want the squad to do well. Naturally, as fans, you can get frustrated, but at the same time, you want to see people get to the best of their abilities that they can. So hopefully that can breed a bit of confidence for them. So on yourself.
Absolutely, 100%. Yeah, I'll just finish. So I think I was going to say that the great thing with Hamilton, I think you did notice that, it was quite palpable as well. People were happy when he scored because there's nothing worse than a situation when we've seen it in the past at other clubs, thankfully not at ourselves, where fans get on the back of a player to the extent they're almost wanting them to fail. Particularly that happens with Man United fans when they turn on a player. You see it with a lot of the clubs down in the Barclays or whatever they call it these days, and fans are actually almost wanting a player to fail so they can be proven to be right. So I was glad to see, Jack got his goal and you could palpably see everybody was pleased for him. Sorry, Duncan, in you come.
I was just on the kind of Dylan Easton of it all. It's a weird situation at the moment because I feel like he's playing a different game to everybody else, and not in a bad way, almost in a kind of deliberate sense. But it's basically like Barry Robson is sending this team out to play kick and rush, but it's kick and rush and Easton. Like, he's still doing what he was doing 2 seasons ago when everybody else in the team was doing the same thing. Whereas now it's like, right, okay, Dylan, you're actually good enough that you can justify your inclusion and you can still do what you want. But everyone else is just playing this. We're back to this fairly regressive stuff. So that first half, a couple of caveats on what I'm about to say. So this is based only on the highlights. I didn't go back to the full match replay. But I think we can all agree that Ian Grieve, as well as doing an excellent job putting the highlights together, also a fairly charitable highlight putter together. He's not cutting out loads of really good Rover stuff. Do you know how many passes there are between Rovers players in that first half? 2. And one of them is a clearance.
No.
there's a Morton chance that gets kind of zipped across the 6-yard box. Paul Hanlon just kind of gets across with his right foot and sort of side foots it. It goes out to Paul McMullen, who turns around and launches it up the park. That's pass number 1. Pass number 2 is Jordan Docherty's cross for the goal. That's the first half. Now, again, obviously, Rovers players completed passes, but none that led to anything remotely close to something Ian felt like he could include in the highlights package. And I think the starker example in there as well is actually the one where Hanlon cuts out, because we're not even passing the ball out of the defence when we regain it back. We're just launching it up the park.
Yeah.
Even the build up to the goal is, Niso actually, I mean, it's not a bad pass. He kind of chips the ball into the channel for Paul McMullen. But even that, I almost counted it in my tally here, because guess what? I've got it for the second half as well. I almost counted it because I was at least there's intention in that. It's an actual attempt at a pass. But that's not, you can't be 2 passes in a highlights package in a first half in a game at home. And Barry Robson I'm all over the place now. Barry Robson in his interview kind of talks as if the first half was really good. Nah, it wasn't. We got a goal, and it was a good goal. But it was the only thing we did in that 45 minutes. There's not another Rovers attack in that 45 minutes that made the highlights. There's no. I'm just repeating stuff from earlier in the season, but there's no plan, there's no strategy, that works. There's no. This is what we're good at, so we're going to go and do it. It's just running about, but not particularly clever running about. And then every now and again, the ball works its way to Dylan Easton, and he tries to play a bit of football. And I don't mean to kind of damn the rest of the team with that. This isn't the Dylan Easton's amazing and everyone else is terrible pitch. But it just feels like everyone else is under instructions that he's not, and it just turns into runabout. There's so few passes. I mean, sorry, you've put 50 pence in me now. I'm just going to run through the rest of this. So the entirety of the highlights package, so 8 minutes of football, there are 14 passes between Raith Rovers players in open play. And all I've deducted from that in open play bit, there is a throw-in, and 2 throw-ins and a corner that also go from a Rovers player to another. Of those 14 passes, 5 of them are made by Dylan Easton. So you've got, in an 8-minute highlight package, 9 passes that are not played by Dylan Easton to another Raith Rovers player. Of our midfield 3, 2 passes. Scott Brown has one when he plays Jack Hamilton in. That's a 6-pass move. That's the best we get in the entire afternoon. And then Ross Matthews has one as well. There's no build. There's no, we're at home, we're going to try and play a bit of football. And that would be all right if we were good at the other stuff. But we're not doing that either. It's not like the highlights are full of 50-yard mazy runs. And you're like, oh, it's actually fine because we don't need to pass our way through because we can run it. And we can't put it long either. We try. But it doesn't come off. It's not leading to anything. It just... Weeks and weeks ago, I'll shut up in a second. I know I go on for a long, long time. But weeks and weeks ago, Robbie, you made a point about style of football. And I remember saying, I didn't feel like I'm that big a kind of zealot when it comes to style of football. I think compared to the average person, I feel like I'll put up with quite a lot. I'm not really totally wedded to needing to see a lot of passing football or anything. There's a lot of direct football teams that I can really get behind. But that's terrible to watch.
Yeah.
Really difficult to actually watch that come through.
So if you're going for a direct style of football, probably the best one that was most efficient in the sense of it actually working in terms of football relative terms is Leicester in 2016, where you could see them shell a ball forward and Jamie Vardy would be onto it. But again, this is a very different game and a very different team. Is it is it arrogant to say that you think as a fan that you deserve better, to go in and sort of say to a manager, obviously, this is how we should be doing it? I know that you've sort of said that point before, Duncan, that we'll probably, as fans, we'll probably go up to games and we'll think things, and it's easy enough to sort of speculate and go into that sense. But you can understand why people are quite apathetic to it, and just the direction that it's gone, and it just feels like it's ticking and tiding over. And again, there's the incremental improvement that we've not got 3 centre backs in there, and we're playing a number 10, which adds an extra body up the pitch. Sorry, Leslie, I feel like you've opted to host this one, but you've got like basically
no chances,
you've got 2 Springers that are going in completely different directions.
That's absolutely brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant, because I tell you what, I do a lot of this kind of stuff in my line of work. And the best thing you can do sometimes is to be a facilitator. I'm not a host, I'm a facilitator. So I'm just there to make sure that everybody occasionally comes in and that we're sticking to time and things like that. And no, this is fantastic. I mean, while I've got the mic, I'm going to thank you very much for mentioning Leicester 2016, because I have a big bee in my bonnet about this. That only worked because of Shinji Okazaki, who was the most Barry Robson Japanese player known to humankind. His job was to run and press and do the running starts and all that kind of stuff. And he was like some kind of Japanese Paul McMullen with better capability. But I digress. I mean, in the interest of kind of keeping the game moving forward, that took us to half time, where I think we've all kind of encapsulated, I think, kind of how we felt. You would have taken the lead, absolutely, but stylistically, it was not great. It was putting me in the mind, actually, of McGlynn's last season, when we had that period where Liam Dick would pass it sideways to Christoph Berra, who'd pass it to Benedictus, who'd try to find a midfielder and fail, and they would shuttle about between them until either somebody slipped and we conceded a goal, or they launched it up to Ethan Varian, who was 20 yards from anybody, and it headed out into thin air. So it was definitely bringing back unpleasant memories. But we did get to half time in the lead, and that's a good thing. And Alan put some AC/DC on the PA system, which was really excellent. So glad to hear that. There was a substitution at half time. Lewis Stevenson disappeared with, I believe, a hamstring niggle, and Ewan Wilson entered the fray. So at that point, it's worth, I think, just noting, we went down to being -5 first-team players. So clearly, Louis Vaughan, Richard Chin, long-term absentees. Callum Fordyce, also long-term absentee. Sean Burnett with a wee knock. And also then Lewis Stevenson. So that's another lever taken out the box that Robson could
If we want to add in an asterisk to that as well, Callum Harris picked up an injury playing for out on loan. So he was also kicking about Starks last weekend because he's injured at the moment. I think it's actually the first injury that he's had since turning pro.
Oh, poor guy. I mean, yeah, again, Callum, good luck if you're listening, and we hope you get back to fitness soon. So the second half got underway, and very soon after, Dylan Easton again, cut inside, found a little space, unleashed Paul and Seal, who sent a fantastic shot that would have been goal of the season had it not been tipped over the bar. I think this is a good time to pause and just maybe reflect a little bit on Paul and Seal. Carol, so by that point we'd had a good 50 minutes. Across the afternoon as a whole, how would you rate Paul and Seal's debut for us? Paul Nisso's debut even for us?
Paul Nisso's, I thought he was, I mean, the game wasn't fantastic as we've discussed, but I think he had a really good debut. I think he's showing promise, keenness, and yeah, if that goal had gone in, we would have been talking a very different podcast this evening, I think. And I think that's, I'm just going to pick up on what Duncan said about sort of style. We are there to be entertained, and you don't expect to be entertained every week, but it is getting to the point where you're like, this is the same merda, but a different day. And
yeah. Sorry to jump in on that, Carol. I just something that was rolling about my head this morning. There was it Bobby Williamson when he was a Kilmarnock manager?
Yep, I know exactly where you're going.
if you want to be entertained, go to the picture.
It was Hibs, yeah.
It was Hibs. I was also thinking though, if I wanted to see runners, I could go to the Athletics. There is a middle ground.
Yeah.
But sorry, just to jump. I just wanted to jump in with that.
I mean, and I do agree. And that's But then if you go to the pictures, it's like, well, if you go to the pictures, I can guarantee I'm going to see a film I like and I want to watch. I'm not coming to the picture to be guaranteed to be entertained. If I wanted that, I would go and watch Barcelona Football Club every week. But I'm not. I'm here to watch Raith Rovers. And I mean, there was at some points yesterday, I was like, is my screen stuck? Because I've seen the same play repeated over and over and over again. And anyway, we're talking about Paul Niso and his fantastic debut. I think, yeah, he was a really good player, standout player. I would have given maybe man of the match if Hamilton hadn't got it for scoring a goal. He was really good. Which questions why has he not played before?
So, I think it's...
Yeah, I have thoughts on that as well. When you go, Robbie.
Yeah, just on the Paul Niso of it all, I was quite relatively confident with his debut, just in the sense that he's done really well. He adds a bit of a physical presence, and you saw him winning a lot of headers. He did have a few sort of moments of what we call maybe naivety. I mean, bearing in mind he's played a handful of senior games. Certainly most of them have been, he's played Rangers B, but again, it's not going to be the same level of football. There was a few moments where he had in the first half like no-look passes that just went to Morton players, but he cut that out. Felt that he's going to be an asset for us in the sense that now that you've seen that, you hope that he can replicate that week on week. Duncan, you're umming and on. I'm going to wait, hold on. But yeah, I felt that it's to go back to the point that you initially made though, Duncan. I think that it's really hard to tell what type of midfielder he is. I'd sort of been on the impression of sort of being a box-to-box midfielder, but I think that, again, just with this style of play, we don't really get to see the best of that because it's just, we're so direct that we're bypassing it completely, and I suppose you can say that the same out of all of our midfielders. When you're going that direct, it's really hard to sort of talk about what they can bring to the table, particularly for a young guy like that. I'm relatively happy with it. I think that in the sense that it's, Barry Robson's had an issue in the sense that he's been reluctant to use these guys, and now we're forced into a situation. We're kind of having to hope rather than know what it's all about. You get the feeling that because he's going to be a bit less attacking than Kai Montague, because obviously we have used Kai Montague in the past and we know what Montague's about, so he is going to be sort of a bit more deep lying. But overall, it was good to see a midfielder just taking a chance, taking a gamble and having a shot. And it was a good save by the keeper, but on another day it goes in, and as you say, it's going to be up there for a goal of the season contender. Keen to see how he does next week against Queen's Park, I'm assuming that we go down the route of playing him, but it's good that based on the body of evidence that we had yesterday, he's a player that we can actually rely on. Fingers crossed.
So I have conflicting thoughts on this, right? I'm trying to kind of hold two positions in my head at once, which is difficult for a guy like me. I thought he played really well. I agree with Carol, actually. I think based on yesterday, if I'd been the match sponsor, I'd have probably given Paul Niso the man of the match. However, I don't think he's what we need at all, actually. I think he's almost the last thing that we need, because on the evidence of that one game, I think the player that he most closely matches to in our squad is both Scott Brown and Ross Matthews, who we've already been complaining about. They're too similar. And I thought, now there is a point here that potentially he's just carrying out the orders he's been given, and maybe this is just the thing that we're doing now, where we just play three midfielders and ask them all to broadly do the same thing or be the same guy. But those couple of passes that you mentioned, Robbie, earlier on, that felt to me like, obviously the guys have been training with him, but it felt almost like his teammates going, is this guy like Sean Byrne? Like, can I give him this pass when he's under a bit of pressure? And then very quickly going, nah, right, okay, right, no, we'll just not do that then. Which is totally fine. Like, the guy's whatever he's 19. Like, it was a couple of tricky passes that he got in tricky positions. He didn't make fatal mistakes.
Yeah.
But his overall performance was Ross Matthews-esque. He was running around, he was putting himself about, he was making challenges, he was clattering into people. As you said, he won some headers in the midfield, which is handy. In my extensive list of passes that were completed and also made the highlight reel, there aren't any. So, not necessarily progressing the ball brilliantly, but it's one game, not a huge body of evidence. But my hope when I saw his name in the team sheet was, is he going to offer us something different? And at this point, I'd basically accept anything different. But it was just when you said there about, he'll be a real asset for us. I don't necessarily think he will, and I don't think it's his fault. I think it's a little bit like, remember when John Hughes, a real Hibs tear today, John Hughes was at Hibs and he signed 4 goalies. And you're like, these could be the best 4, one of them was Graham Smith, who weren't, like, these could be the best 4 goalies in the country, but it doesn't matter, because you don't need 4 goalies. Like, that's a little bit how I felt watching that yesterday. And I was like, this guy looks really good, but he's doing a job we've already got 2 guys to do. And it's just frustrating, again. Because actually, maybe he is really decent with the ball at his feet. Maybe he can put his foot in the ball and spray some passes around, and he just doesn't get the chance in this Rovers side in one afternoon. But, as I say, 2 positions I was holding in my head at once. I thought he is playing really well, and he is basically not doing anything that we actually need him to do, and it's not his fault. Yeah, that was my overriding view. As I say, I really liked him, thought he played really well, and was really annoyed by it.
There's a point I will come back to maybe later if we have time, and I'd say that's not the first time that's happened in the last few seasons with us. Kyle Turner coming in springs to mind. When we had him on the pitch and you effectively had Sam Stanton, Louis Vaughan and Dylan Easton all doing the jobs that Kyle Turner was also good at. So it's not the first time this has happened, and it's becoming a bit of a recurring pattern. But again, nonetheless, in the interests of keeping things ticking forward, we had a Stramash in front of the goal, and we then had the next incident, which was a penalty shout. So Jordan Doherty had a throw in from the right, which he threw to Jack Hamilton, who chased it down the edge of the box, flicked it on to Scott Brown, who then pinged it over in the direction of Dylan Easton, who was unceremoniously bundled to the deck. Colin Stevens sprung into action again and did nothing, much to the chagrin of the South Stand, and play carried on. Let's just do a quick straw poll for everybody. Carol, was that a penalty?
I'm going to say yes.
Okay. Duncan, was that a penalty?
I like that you expected me to give you a short answer to this. Yes, it is a penalty, but I'm not surprised the referee didn't give it. I think it's a very easy one not to give. When the ball is that far away, I think it's very easy just to not give the penalty, effectively. Just go, look, I'm just going to pretend I didn't see that, because fundamentally the ball was 30 yards away and you weren't going to touch it inside the box. So, yeah, letter of the law, I think that is a penalty. If you get VAR in the game, they'll go back and give that as a penalty, but also very easy for the referee to turn a blind eye, and ultimately, obviously I was out my seat screaming and roaring, but I'm not overly bothered that we didn't get that in the end.
Robbie, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was, but again, it's trying to take these things with a degree of realism to them, in the sense that we've had other decisions that have gone in our way earlier on this season. These things even themselves out, supposedly. It's Morton and Dunfermline have both been pretty prolific in their sort of post-match interviews of, we're off to speak to Willie Collum at the SFA come Monday morning to get an apology. It's these things happen. It's just, even Barry Robson said they didn't see it in real time, so there wasn't any mention of it from him. But our players all seem pretty adamant that it was a penalty. I'm sure that Aaron Comrie probably says, there was nothing to it. It depends who you ask. I'm sure Morton fans will be sitting there like, well, what about what happened at Capello? Just got to.
I mean, on the highlights, it looks like the linesman should have the assistant referee, should have a good sight of it, and he could have called it, but he didn't.
I think the thing for me is that it was I wouldn't necessarily put it as a sort of momentum shift as such, but it just felt like it was just within the stand. It kind of came to that point where you look at it and you think, after that, Morton had been in the game. They were never out of the game effectively. But it was a moment where you thought, we've been relatively strong in the second half. We've not played amazing by any stretch of the imagination. It's been a relatively turgid game, but if you get the penalty for that and you score it, they're not coming back from 2-0. Like, you just with the chances, they obviously get their goal, but you didn't really see that in the sense of they were getting the ball into the box. They're good with their set pieces, but they weren't it wasn't a case of like peppering the goal, which you see some weeks. And they showed a degree of organisation, Morton. Yeah, it's just frustrating, but you're not going to sit and lose any sleep over it.
Pretty much where I was at as well. I mean, I think if it had been the other way round and it hadn't been given, we'd be sitting here saying that was a really good bit of pragmatism from the referee, because like you're all saying, it's not as if the ball was being played into Easton's chest for him to then howitzer into the net. It was going sailing over his head to bounce out harmlessly for the throw-in. So it's not as... You would, I think, call that a bit of pragmatic refereeing, because it's not as if we'd lost any advantage. But like you're saying, Robbie, I think from then on, you kind of think, right, this is not our day. We're not getting another goal, and we're not winning this. And sure enough, that is what came to pass. Before we get to that point, though, we did have, again, another stramash down at the end with a lot of very good blocking, both from Paul Hanlon and also from Dara O'Connor. We'll come back to you again, Robbie. Dara O'Connor, how you been feeling about his performances so far?
Well, are you going to ask me in terms of the ball progression, or are you going to ask me in terms of the defending?
I'll talk about both. You can segue into the progression if you want.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. So I think defensively he's been really solid. He's done his job. He looks comfortable at winning the ball in the air, as you'd expect for someone of his stature. Relatively solid partnership at the moment with Paul Hanlon. I know he came into a game, tough one in the derby, but there is also the other side where, certainly in the first half, again, you don't know whether it's by design of Barry Robson and saying, this is the way that we're going to be playing, I want you to do this. But the balls out from the back seem to be very howitzery, shall we say, for lack of a better phrase. They seem to be quite direct. As a fan, you would rather see the ball come out from the back and into midfield rather than going straight up long. But, you know, if that's the way that they're elected to play, or if that's the way that they're told to play, maybe Darryl O'Connor's just under instructions that he's got to be as direct as possible. So I wouldn't want to level that against him personally, and to sort of go down that route. But I think he's been a solid acquisition. I'm glad that we got him while we did. Now that the Callum Fordyce situation really emphasises the importance that we needed earlier on in the season of getting that extra centre back in. So it's almost like there has been a lot of comment online about the recruitment at the club. And after a result like that, a lot of things come under the microscope. And I think that that's been a good decision, a good bit of foresight. I know that a lot of people had asked for it, but they have done well to get in an experienced centre back in. That means that we're not sort of Paul Hanlon and Jordan Doherty sitting at the back, and then we're having to look elsewhere on the pitch and shift things about and mix it up. We've got sort of a, right, okay, we know where we're going with it and moving on.
Aye, yeah, recruitment again is maybe something we might come on to a little bit later, but we do have to get the end of the game out of the way first. And the inevitable happened. At some point there was Jackson Longridge trying to do an overhead Rabona or something like that, which didn't quite work out. But it was all techers in the box in front of the away end. And as a corner came in from the left, and again our man Kris Moore pinged what happened to be a back heel into the back of the net to send the packed North Stand wild in adulation and level the score at 1-1. Carol, from your perspective, you had the view on Raith TV. I think that was a bit of exceptional skill. Was that a bit of luck? How many times out of 100 do you think that would happen?
At one time out of 100, that was lucky, because it was just pinging around like a pinball in there. But on the other hand, the moment that the corner left the player's foot, you knew that ball was going in some way, shape or form. that ball was hitting the back of the net, either off someone's arse, someone's forehead, someone's heel, not necessarily Morton player. It was going in that, because it was just an overcrowded scrap heap of a box. And yeah, it was inevitable it was going to go in. So no, it wasn't beautiful skill, it was luck. Because our luck was out by that point, and there was no way that ball was not hitting the back of the net.
It was, at a certain degree, inevitable that this was going to happen. I mean, I think just to give a bit of credit to Morton, they were well disciplined, they were well drilled, they didn't exactly set the heather alight. I'm probably maybe a bit of an outlier. Now, I do have quite a lot of time for Dougie, Imrie and Morton and their approach. They get on with it, and they, I think if we'd held on for the win, they would have been going back along the M8 and the various roads and the multiple train stations in that part of the world, feeling pretty aggrieved. But they came away probably worth a point in the end. There was then, just to pick up on what Robbie was saying before, there was one final chance. The ball failed to Darragh O'Connor, who tried to play it through for Josh Gentles, but overhit it, and it actually bounced off the advertising hoarding and Colin Stephen Blue for full time. But the fact was, Gentles had only been on the park for about 3 minutes at that point. I'll direct this question to you, Duncan, in the first instance, and everybody else can jump in as you wish. Did the manager leave it too late with the substitutions, and could we have secured a different outcome had we made any changes earlier or more effectively?
Maybe. I think to take that last corner in kind of microcosm, right? So should they have made the change 10 minutes earlier? Possibly. Once you're in that position, the corner's given, Jack Hamilton's absolutely the guy you want on the park there. And I think even if you'd put Gentles on 10 minutes earlier and you still get to that point, I think you're looking at it and going, I wish I still had Jack Hamilton in there. Because we do a fair number of the corners that come into our box, Jack Hamilton's the guy who gets his first touch. Again, I think it is a slight mitigation for Barry Robson that he doesn't have bundles of alternative options there. Not seen a lot of Josh Gentles. Would appear he's not the next Ali McCoist. So I think it probably would have been a case of putting him on to try and stretch the game. You put him on with 10 minutes to go, but we don't, sorry to bang the same old drum, we don't really play a degree of football that helps with that. Because all we're going to do is just bang it along at him. So unless he can win it as well as Jack Hamilton can, there's not really any benefit to it. You're potentially thinking, maybe we can catch Morton out with a ball over the top, but that never really looked like doing it. Just to take a slight alternative angle on something that you said there, I don't know that this necessarily did feel inevitable to me. I didn't really have that same feel to it. Even in the sense that, as a kind of natural football fan thing, I didn't really feel like it was one of those where it's like, Morton are definitely going to equalise. But it did feel like Morton were always could equalise, almost, if that makes sense. We were never comfortable. We were never in control. I couldn't tell you the last time I felt like we were in control of a game of football. Probably the second half against Arbroath. But we just left the game far too open and far too open to chance. Like that Airdrie game, we drew nothing each and they hit the bar in the last minute. That was always a possibility that they would score a goal. And it didn't feel like, we've let this game slip or anything like that. I felt like the game was just always in the balance. And that through, good fortune, serendipity, we got our goal after 39 minutes. They got theirs after 91. But you could have, for all the part in the game, you could have flipped that around. I think a draw was fair. I think a nothing each draw would have been more reflective of the game as a whole. And I also just, sorry, while I'm disagreeing with things people have said, I think he should get quite a lot of credit for that goal as well. I think if the ball ends up in the back of the net, you basically should get full credit anyway. But I think you can almost see Jordan Doherty, I think, thinks he's done enough because he knows the ball's coming in behind. I think, like anything, he's thinking, is my man going to head this in the goal? And he's basically like, no, he's not. Like, I've pretty much done what I needed to do here, and it's just that little bit of improvisation, which, yeah, if you give him another 10 goes at that, I don't imagine any of them end up in the goal. But the fact that this one does, I think he should get a lot of credit for that.
Absolutely, totally fair point as well. I think it was a nice bit of technique, and again, had it been the other way around, we would be memeing the hell out of it. It would have been on the socials on Monday morning first thing. And that brought the game to a close with a smattering of boos from the South Stand, like the cows that you hear in the Highlands at dawn in summer. Bit of a weird one. I mean, because we've had results like that before. We've had quite a few boots in the balls like that before. But if you kind of felt, this is where you guys were talking about this on the pre-match about perspective and how perspective can shift. I kind of thought, if that had been Ian Murray, maybe even Neil Collins, you might be thinking, it's not a disaster. We've got a point. We've got 2 very winnable games coming up. We had 5 players missing by the end of the game. You would take that, given the circumstances, against a team that have taken points off a lot of teams. You know, we kick on, we're still in the hunt, and you know we can kick on from there. It categorically did not feel like that, both in our group chat and also from what I was reading online, and certainly from the mood music in this stand. Robbie, would you say, based on that result, that Robson has undone some, if not all, of the good work that he did last week? Is he any closer to the fans turning on him?
I mean, if we're being brutally honest, I don't think last week convinced particularly any of the doubters, shall we say. But the result yesterday, I don't like. It's not one that Barry Robson was ever going to be in any danger of sort of getting into the main stand of Starks Park, and then a director's tapping on the shoulder saying, "Can we catch you for 5 minutes?" And then you see him disappearing over an advertising hoarding like Jim Goodwin. But it's one that you can understand the mood music, because particularly among the support, people are just, the atmosphere's just downbeat. People are tired in terms of the directness of the play. People just, it's coming into winter. With all due respect to Morton, they come off the back of a bad defeat. It's going to be a tough game, but you still expect a performance like where we do try and play a bit of football, and we do try, and we've seen it before with Rovers where, look, Barry Robson at the tail end of last season was getting the team to play some decent performances, and we were doing well. We were getting the ball on the deck and we were doing fine with it. But for whatever reason, we've completely abandoned that. And you can just feel it, that there just seems to be this sort of wholesale change within the support, where a lot of people are sort of asking the question about, like, do I really want to spend my Saturday on a cold afternoon going to Starks Park and watching a game of football that's not going to entertain me? Now, I get that we're still going to get a decent crowd there, and it's going to be up on the days when we were in League One, and that it's an improvement on that sense. But yeah, just, I think a lot of people are looking introspectively at the moment, and probably quite vocally as well, being outwardly displeased with the performances. And I think it just raises the wider questions. Again, we mentioned recruitment before. I'm maybe less sold on that one. I feel like it's just an underutilisation in terms of the personnel that we've got. I think that we do have the players there to be able to play better level of football than we are. Again, Barry Robson would probably say otherwise. He's spoken about the conditions that the game was played under. He's probably have 101 explanations for the reason that he's chosen to set up the way that he has. But just as a supporter, again, I don't know if I feel entitled, but you're looking at it and saying, we could probably do better than that.
So, sorry to jump in again. Something you said earlier, and it touched on that point as well. You said about being entitled. Earlier on, you said, the supporters feel like they deserve a better style of football, right? And actually, I don't know that they necessarily do. I mean, so some people definitely do, right? I think we've all been stood near people who have a kind of sense of entitlement. I suppose, to speak for myself, I've never really felt that way. I don't really feel like... I don't really like this kind of we deserve better, or like this is unacceptable. Because partly, I think the thing that I come back to is, as much as we all care about the football club, and of course we do, and we've put in decades and decades, like you're not telling me that the guys who are out there as their job don't care about it.
100%.
And that's sometimes what I think feels. And sorry, I'm not saying you're saying this at all by any means. Where though I think so, it's not about a case of like, oh, I think we deserve better football, or like we're entitled to a better style. But I do think there is an element of, if you're going to play what is, to be a little bit harsh, like lowest common denominator football, like the running about stuff is the bit that you just said there. Like, I feel like I could do better than this. Like, that's the bit I could work out. Like, if you just like, was it Channel 4's Faking It? If you told me I had to be a football manager in some lower league side in England and they just rocked up like, this is your new gaffer, the first thing I would do would be like, run about. Like, you guys run about until I can work out who the assistant manager is and get him to knock up some tactics. So if you're going to do that, it needs to be good. It needs to be better. And you need to get results. Because if you try and do really intricate, really quick passing football and it's not working, some people will kick off immediately. But some people will go, well, look, you can see what he's trying to do. Mm-hmm. This is going to take time. Same with playing young players sometimes. Where it's like, yeah, look, he's made mistakes, but he needs time and he'll develop. When you're just coming out and going, look, we're just going to outrun everybody, and it doesn't work, it's like, right, cool. Well, now what? Like, there is no patience. There's no run harder again. Like, yeah, and this is where I think this is where Barry Robson has his problem, one of many. So last week was about as good as we could expect. Because I think, to be fair, I think we'd been at the point where we were basically, some of us, writing him off. And then he got the result. But then you have this acid test of, like, you've got the result, and to a degree you had the performance. So is that the first 5 degrees of you turning this battleship around? Or is that a little bit of a kind of false dawn, to mix my metaphors? And yesterday was just more of what we'd had previously. Yeah. And you'll have to take my word for this. I was thinking this with 5 minutes to go when we were 1-0 up. Because sometimes, particularly towards the end of a game, I start thinking, what am I going to talk about them on? We'll get in this podcast. Like, what's the talking point? What's the kind of narrative from this? And I was thinking, I don't think I've seen any of the stuff that we kind of needed to see from Barry Robson. And like I said right at the beginning, there is some mitigation there. He's now missing quite a lot of players who might have been able to do something different. But even that kind of falls on deaf ears a wee bit for me. Like when he's going, we've not got Richard Chin, like he would have made a big difference. Bear in mind, Barry Robson's only started Richard Chin in one football match.
Yeah.
Like, he wasn't his star man. He had to wait a long, long time, and then he started to show it, and then he was injured. Like, we saw him persist with this back three for far too long. Just to cover off a couple of kind of stray points, I think that game yesterday was as good a body of evidence as you'll get that we never need to go back to the back three again.
Yeah.
Because I thought, well, look at the goal, first of all. It's Jordan Docherty running out from right back. Perfect. Great. None of our wing backs did that, so that's fine. So let's just use the right back to do that. And then second half, Ewan Wilson came on for Lewis Stevenson. Being quite critical, me personally, I'd been quite critical of Ewan Wilson before, particularly first couple of games. I thought he was really, really good yesterday. From left back, linked up with Dylan Easton really quite well.
There was a moment in midway through the second half, I think, or later on in the second half, where basically we broke out and he kind of went forward. There was a ball bouncing about and it was sort of 50-50 between him and the Morton player to get it. And if Morton get it, then they're coming straight back down our throats. But he just basically controlled it really well, took it down, took possession, and then sprayed the ball out to the other wing, which was great to see. I thought that he had I think that I don't feel like we've necessarily been the most critical on this don't think we've been really too critical at all of the players on this podcast in terms of this game. And I think Wilson had an assured performance, which was good to see. I think that that was something that I'm quite happy to watch. But anyway, carry on, Duncan.
Well, let me just give you my final thing then, and then I think maybe I'll be done. Maybe. Well, final point on Barry Robson and his interview. I think something I'd been kind of struggling to put words to for a few weeks kind of crystallised for me this weekend. We talked about the interviews, so I was kind of repeating something Sean had said previously about you want the manager to reflect the game that you've seen. I have an addendum to that, a secondary point to that. I also want the manager to tell me something I don't already know.
A Davy Martindale.
Yeah, but it doesn't have to be like breaking down the tactics of the game. But don't come out and tell me it's windy. Like, I know it's windy. Yeah, like, obviously it's windy. I've been sitting in the wind for an hour and a half. Like, tell me things I don't know. Tell me why you've made certain decisions. And the thing is, he says, Sean Byrne's been struggling with this injury for a while. Maybe that's why Sean Byrne's not been playing so much recently. So tell us that, and then we'll know that, and then, you know, it's a factor we can use to understand what's happening. And it's that element of, like, it's a 7-minute interview. I don't think I learned anything. I don't think there was anything in it that Barry Robson said where I was like, oh yeah. Just none of that. Just like, it was windy. Morton were more direct than us. It's like, right, okay. You know, they played the ball long. It's like, all right, cool. So they no wind for them then, apparently. Like, I don't know, man. It just, those are the last of my scattered thoughts, I think, on this one.
Just to offer something a bit more forward-facing and hopefully upbeat and positive, Carol. So we've got in the next couple of weeks, we've got
no pressure.
A couple of games coming up. Objectively, and I say that very, very carefully, in theory, these should be games where we can maybe expect to get something out of them, given that we are playing the teams in 9th and 10th. And I say objectively very strongly there. What do you think we can change for those games, and what do you think needs to change for us to get something out of those and look convincing? And what do you think would be an acceptable return, points and goals-wise, over the next 2 games?
Gosh, no pressure, Leslie, no pressure at all. Jeez, I'm going to pick up on like what Duncan said about Barry Robson. I understand that he wants to play his cards close to his chest, and he doesn't want to give away his tactics and let oppositions know that Sean Byrne is injured and stuff and all that. But he is not enamouring himself to anyone, and either he is completely blind to what's going on or doesn't care about what's going on. And I think that's what needs to change, is that he needs to show he cares. It's all very well saying this is our club at the end of the interview, but show you care, which sounds so pathetic and so woke. I understand, but we're not getting the best out of what we have on that pitch. We have good players on paper. Why are they not taking that and transferring it on? And I've not been in Scotland for a year. I can't imagine the weather's changed that much. Everyone knows how that weather works at Stars Park. It's not an excuse. So I'm going to agree with Duncan. Stop making excuses and just show that you care and this means something.
I would, just to come in there, I think that just with the way that it is, I don't think that we'll get that side of Robson. I would be very astonished if we did, if I'm being brutally honest. But I think for me, it's just, look, in terms of...
Well, then fake it. You just fake it, because it'll get money in the bank. What's easier, having the fans
I don't think, Carol, I think at this point I'd be astonished if that is to get money in the bank. I think that if it was, we'd probably be the first people to turn around and say, he's faking it now because he's done the opposite. But
yeah,
like I think
we'll just make his life easier so that nobody's booing at the end.
I think the main thing is the directness is just absolutely draining the soul at the moment. I think that he's made a rod for his own back in the sense that he's relying on the same players. Duncan, you mentioned Josh Gentles. I think before today he'd had about like 15 minutes of football or something like that, maybe a bit more. But look, we're never going to know, and he's not going to get the experience. The way to build up experience is by giving players game time, and we just continue to sort of end up in these situations where we're going back to the same well with the same players. Even yesterday, I mean, did Callum Smith even get on yesterday? I don't think he did.
No, I didn't. No.
Just, I feel like you would want to see some more drastic changes going forward in the sense of maybe with a couple of options. I think it was good that Jack Hamilton got his goal and that he put in a good performance yesterday, but I would have liked to have seen options utilised sooner in terms of to bring it up, because I know that, again, to come back to what you said, Duncan, obviously you're asking the question about like, okay, well, we don't really play in a way that's going to facilitate Gentles getting in behind or getting direct or whatever. But then at the same time, like, if we can feed the ball into him, we don't actually know what he can offer because he's had so little game time in terms of football. It's just, it feels like a situation that could be manageable and we could handle it better, but we just don't see any changes on that front. But yeah, to go on to the recruitment aspect, I know there have been a lot of talk in terms of the misuse in players. I don't feel like our recruitment's like a lot of people asking the question about how we don't bring enough forward. I think that the reason for that is that we touched on it in the pre-match podcast, like we're very much like the bottom rung on the ladder in terms of where players can go. So I think that we have to have a realistic expectation that we probably have scoped out players and that there has been
it's not a massive market. It's not like Scottish football is swimming in out of contract forwards with 20 goals in them a season.
But I would say as well that I think that with the recruitment, generally speaking, I think that it's actually been all right. I just feel like that we just don't utilise the players in the same way. But I think the problem that we've got with Barry Robson is that if you look back 5 years ago, I said this in our group chat yesterday, how come 5 years ago we were sort of COVID, we were playing a better level of football under John McGlynn after we'd just been promoted? And I get that there's reasons for that. We probably spent a bit more money in terms of the player contracts and things that, again, fans like ourselves don't see we only see what's on the pitch. We don't see what goes on behind the scenes and the sort of potential hangover for that we might experience. But even under Ian Murray, like, I think that we're at a point where, we were getting, all the games were tight, but the performances were there. And we had shoots, I think, in the sense of you could see the direction that we're going. At the moment, it just feels like the wheels are spinning, and we're like, Duncan, you touched on it before with Stephen Presley before the start of the season. He's sacked, but he just doesn't know it. I think that Barry Robson, it's probably a similar situation where there's so many fans that are just waiting. Like, even yesterday, as I said before, it wasn't a result for sacking, but it's one where it's just going to feed into the mood music for it. We're not going to get a sacking in the sense of after this game, but it's just a lot of people asking the questions. And I think that's where the difficulty is. It just feels like a situation that's, Blur kind of touched on it in the pre-match, where it's just going to continue to linger on, and it's hard to see how he gets people back into sort of the good graces. I'm sure he'll argue that he's doing the best job that he can. It's just hard to figure out.
It's like watching someone play a computer game and you're screaming from the other side of the sofa, bloody press the X, and they're no, I know how to do it my way. It's like, it's like you can see it happening, and you're like, he knows more about football than I will ever know in my life. But why can't he see what we can see? And that's what's frustrating. It's like, he should be smarter than we are and better than we are. And it's just like watching someone fuck up a computer game.
Les, I know you wanted to talk about recruitment, so just a brief point on that from me. First of all, I don't think Barry Robson is quite in that sort of dead man walking bit yet. I don't think it is irredeemable, and I think last week sort of showed why. But what he needs is 3 or 4 last weeks, and there are still underlying issues that means that he's not building up the same levels of credit that he has. But I tell you this, he is very, very close, because you're now really looking at 2 games, Queen's Park and Airdrie. I think we're probably at the point where he needs 6 points. And it probably has to be 6 points well won. Like, these kind of 1-0, I don't think we'll cut it anymore.
Yeah.
He's getting really into that kind of troublesome territory. And the point on the recruitment, I think, for me, individually, I think it's relatively difficult to criticise.
Yeah.
Like, there's not many guys that we've brought in over, the last bit of time who've been completely terrible. It's actually more so, it's pointing the finger at guys who just aren't being used. But there's maybe more of a slightly higher level question to be asked, in the sense of, like, we did a great bit of business to bring in Paul McMullen and then didn't play wingers for weeks and weeks after that. And you're like, what happened there? And now we've had to revert to this 4-2-3-1, but we don't have a number 10 in the squad to be able to do it. And you're like, well, it's all very well and good signing really good players in other places. But again, to use the same exaggerated example I used before, you sign 4 really good defenders, 4 really good midfielders, and 3 really good strikers. The lack of a goalkeeper is really going to let you down on a Saturday. Like, it's not that dramatic, but it's a minor version of the same thing. Yeah, Wes, I'm intrigued to hear your. It feels like every week you've been kind of teasing us with a dissertation on the kind of wider recruitment piece. I don't know how long it's got to now, but I'm keen to hear it.
I mean, Robbie's kind of actually, I think, answered a lot of it, and it was just that I think there has to be an element of managing expectations. And, like you were saying, and again on the pre-match, our budget is really not huge. Despite what supporters of other teams might make out, we're probably definitely not the smallest in the division, but we're not the biggest in the division. It's hard to get folk in, and it's hard to get players in. And I think, Ian Latto said this on the podcast a long time ago. We're simple supporters in the South Stand. All we see is a position that hasn't been filled. And if you went to Starks Park on Monday morning, went into John Potter's office with a non-disclosure agreement and sat down with him, don't do this, by the way, because he's a busy man and he doesn't need us jobbers harassing him. If you went to his office and sat down with a list of 10 players and said, I think we should have tried to sign these, why didn't we? For every single player on that list, I bet you he would start, we looked at him, but. And some of it would be, his agent was wanting too much money, he was wanting a 3-year deal, there was another team giving him another £200 a week. Some of it would be stuff that we don't even register, things like, he's got a house over near Ayr and his kids are just starting school and he doesn't want to be spending 4 hours in the car every day. Might be young boys from England, it's a long way from his family, or, like we've had with guys from abroad with the Platinic before, he maybe just doesn't fancy it anymore for the amount of money we're prepared to give him. So I think part of my kind of bugbear is I think there has to be an element of managing expectations in that we do not have the budget. This is probably where I think we're going to finish the season. I think 6th or 7th is probably where we're going to finish. And I think that's probably in line with our budget. At the same time, though, that does not mean that you can just look at the product in the park and say that's good or that's fine. And part of that, I think, is a question about, bringing guys in and then not necessarily using them in the right way. So bringing McMullen in and not using wingers for weeks is an example of that. Bringing in a brick shithouse left back in Wilson and then trying to get him to play like prime Cafu or something is another example of that. I think the players we've got there are they're good. I think we've got a good squad there. Individually, the abilities are there, but if you look at our attack in midfield, since Ian Murray gave that speech about no getting a tune out the players, we've made 2 permanent changes to our midfield and our attack. We've lost Sam Stanton and we've lost Jamie Gullen. I think we've lost somebody else as well, who somebody's going to shout at me from elsewhere.
Aidan Connolly,
that's the boy I was thinking of. Aidan Connolly, thank you. We've picked up Paul McMullen and Richard Chin. That's really not a lot of turnover. And some of that is down to the fact we've given guys long contracts, and there's absolutely a logic to that. Some of it does kind of feel a bit, though, like things are getting a bit stale. If you look at something like Partick, they've brought in Let Sosa, they've brought in Scott Martin, who's now injured. They've brought guys in who are capable of doing all kinds of different things. There's a level of which you kind of think, we've done really well out the squad we have. They're great players. They're very likeable. But we do maybe need to be thinking about how we're getting people in that are offering us something different. Again, just to go back to what I was saying about managing expectations, we've tried. We've tried that. And we've gone out, we've got guys, we've got Richard Chin, we don't know what he can offer because he's injured. We've got J. Rowe, that was a gamble that we'll see how that pans out. That we are trying these things, but ultimately, you just kind of hope that the product that we're getting in the park, it's starting to remind me a bit of Grant Murray's tenure, where you're not in danger of relegation. You're capable of good performances now and again, but you're getting eye-bleeding stuff in between. So a whole mixed bag there. I think recruitment is difficult going forward. I would like to think how we can maybe do things a bit differently.
See, just to interject there, Les, I think that, again, it probably comes across in the podcast with how we've spoken, that the criticism, there's individual criticism throughout matches, but I don't think anyone looks within our squad and sort of says, like, that player is not good enough standard to be playing for Raith Rovers Football Club. I think over the piece, like, you look at the squad and you say, yep, they do a job, I can see where they fit in. Maybe they're underperforming at the moment, but you've still got belief that they've got a pedigree. So probably Paul McMullen's a good example. Paul McMullen, to me, feels like how Josh Mullen was at the end of last season, where people were just, again, I suppose there's a bit of a tangible difference in the sense that Josh was backing it up with the stats. McMullen just probably going through a bit of a rough patch at the moment, but you've got to have belief that, look, he's done it before, he can do it again. He can, if he gets his head up and he's performing well, probably the same degree with J. Rowe as well. Where, for me, you look across the squad and they've all got some degree of influence and some degree where you can sort of look to them and say, yeah, I've got a belief that you can do good. Whereas with the manager, I can understand why there is that sort of scepticism. And to go back to your point, Duncan, I think we should be looking for 6 points from the next two games. Maybe it's, again, potentially arrogant to say, but I know there's no easy games in the division, and we'll say that, we'll always maintain that. But at the same time, I think these are the games that you need to be going and winning if you're going to be looking at that playoff picture. And if we do that, fair play to Barry Robson. If he gets the wins and can get us a bit of momentum and get us back going, do want him to succeed. But it's just difficult when it's very, very turgid. And a game like yesterday, I think if that ends 5 minutes earlier with a 1-0 win, again, you don't get nearly as much of the criticism as you do in the podcast. I think probably in terms of the play style, you would say, yeah, fair dues, but we still got the result. But because we draw the game and we draw it in the manner that we did, that then in turn feeds into the sort of perception and the sort of discussions that we're having. And it probably creates a very different picture for himself with what he's talking about in his post-match.
Right, with that in mind, I think we've squeezed nearly 80 minutes, if not more, out of a 1-1 draw that was I
can see Duncan biting his tongue there.
I'm just going to say the same old stuff. It's completely fine.
Fire on. Let you have the... In that case, then, I think we can start to look forward. Look forward in terms of time, not look forward in terms of psychological state, to a visit to the Lego Stadium, Lesser Hampden, which is coming up. We will be back at some point during the week, probably without a tutor hosting. It will be much more like the Oh No No podcast, much less like the Wine Shuffle. But yeah, thank you all for tuning in, and thanks everybody for joining, and we will speak to you all soon. Goodbye.